So everybody said everything already, so I'm just going to smile and stand here. So I wanted to thank Rebecca for organizing this panel, Gita for thinking to include me, and the rest of the panelists for their support and insights today, many of which I hope to echo here. As Rebecca and Gita have said, for the last year, I have been the inaugural Mellon University Press Diversity Fellow at the MIT Press. My remarks today will largely focus on my experience in this position. You'll have to forgive me if my thoughts are brief or disconnected. As an academic by training, I'm used to public speaking, but usually as a humanist and as a close reader, I have some sort of text, whether that's a novel or a film or a play, that I can dissect the meaning from. Today, however, I'm asked to reflect and dissect meaning instead on my personal experience, which is hard for anybody who's in therapy. You know that. I figured the best way to do this is to outline my own professional trajectory and how I came to the program. I received my PhD in American Studies and Ethnicity in 2012 from the University of Southern California. Right, Gita's talking about expanding the framework. I have no sort of science background, no publishing background, but I do have a PhD, but it's in something completely different. I wrote a dissertation on Cuban diasporic cultural productions and the presence of illegitimate familial subjects in these texts, things and characters like orphans, wayward daughters, bastard children, and fictive kinships. I theorize these illegitimate figures as metaphors for the condition of political exile, such that a sense of unbelonging on the level of the nation, as in when the Cubans fled their home country, that sense of unbelonging is mutually articulated on the level of the family. So being unmoored from nationality allows for, or in some cases causes, a reconceptualization of the family unit itself. I'm not nervous. After receiving my doctorate, I taught Latinx studies at 2 separate liberal arts colleges here in Massachusetts before deciding that I no longer wanted to pursue a career in the professoriate. There's a multitude of reasons behind that decision. However, again, I'll save that for my therapist and not for this conversation. While I was sure about leaving the professoriate, how to best translate and utilize my skill sets as a professor, including researching, instructing, writing, mentoring, into another sector was as yet unclear. I had often fantasized, as I'm sure you know most academics do, about a work life outside of the academy, a 9-to-5 job that you leave behind when you clock out. I still fantasize about that mythic job, as I've learned this year that publishing cycle never rests. I'd considered publishing as an option before. I even had a folder of bookmarks of publishing career sites like the Lunch Board and some other specific to individual presses. Like a good researcher, I would study the language of the job posts, trying to decipher which editors did what, right? There's copy editors, there's acquisitions editors, there's like some other, why are they all called editors? I have no idea what they do from that. And trying to understand what those editors did and where I might fit in that. I had this romantic image of the industry in my head too. My favorite movie is You've Got Mail, and it's all about sort of publishing. And I also love that television series with Sutton Foster, Younger, where she's in the fabulous publishing industry. It's not at all my experience. I'm going to write them a letter about that. I'd all but given up on pursuing a job in publishing, however. I had no idea what press would be right for me because of these romantic images I had from popular culture. I'd always just assumed that a trade press would be where I'd be working if I went into publishing. It didn't occur to me until very late in the process that a scholarly press would allow me to stay in the academy in a different way. I also could never quite tell what positions were right for me, which department made sense. Was it editorial? Was it acquisitions? Could I apply directly to be an acquisitions editor? Or would I have to start out as an assistant and work my way up? Was there a way that my PhD and time as a professor could gain a foothold and perhaps cut some of that time down? Who could I ask these questions to, right? My parents did not go to college. I could not ask them these sorts of things. There are too many questions I still had about the industry, so I'd started applying to jobs in the nonprofit sector and some academic administration positions. After a few months on a whim, I went back to the AUP jobs list site and came across the Mellon Fellowship. To be frank, it seemed perfect. I was a Mellon Fellow as an undergrad, trying to go into grad school. Mellon funded my first year of graduate school. Mellon just seems to like paying me, I think. I thought it would give me a year's worth of experience in the industry to figure out the answers to these very questions that I had. That the fellowship also explicitly addressed the need to diversify the workforce assured me that this position would be in keeping with the work that, as an ethnic studies scholar, I had been engaging in the academy for years. The year-long structure would allow me to treat the fellowship as an intensive training, at the end of which I would have a clearer picture of my prospects in the industry. So, my experience this year. All in all, I'd say that my experience this year has been pretty ordinary when I think about it. I spent the last year learning many of the things that most people at the assistant level will learn about workflow processes, the press structure, day-to-day routines, the peer review process, contracts, databases, Onyx feeds, communicating with authors and editors, coordinating the efforts of several departments on multiple projects at various stages within the publishing process. In saying that my experience has been pretty ordinary, I of course do not mean to diminish the importance of the program. Rather, that my year has been ordinary seems extraordinary to me, right? That it's such a non-issue for me. Since just over a year ago, I relatively knew little about the publishing industry and if and how I might fit within the profession. Without the fellowship program, I do not think I could have had an ordinary year this year. Of course, other features of the program augmented the day-to-day and what I imagine as the experience of any other assistant position, making this less than ordinary, I'm sure. Some of the benefits of the program, as I see them, include that as a diversity fellow, I entered publishing with a cohort of 3 other fellows at the corresponding presses. We leaned on each other as any cohort does. We shared resources that we found about publishing, about jobs, about which listservs to be on, which listservs to not be on. We cheered each other's successes on. All 3 of the other fellows have gone on to assistant jobs at other presses. We lent each other an ear or were a sounding board when someone needed it, right? How do I respond to this email that I got that I don't know how to respond to? Let's workshop that together. This sense of community and camaraderie is vital to these programs as they stave off the isolation of being one of the few people of color at a press, and they facilitate the adaptation of these new employees. Another benefit of the fellowship is the amount of access I have had to department heads throughout the process. I had several meetings with heads at my own press, and through the fellowship's monthly webinars, access to experts in the areas, experts in their areas at other presses. This allowed me to gain a broader sense of the workings of the university press and how that maps onto its structure and where I could possibly fit into that. I've also had a great mentor this last year. Gita has answered any and all questions that I've had, no matter how big or small or smart or dumb, right? Like, what's a transmittal? I completely asked that. There's several times I'm just like, so somebody said this word and I have no idea what, she's like, okay, that's great, it means this. She's never made me feel unappreciated or even like a subordinate. In researching the press before I applied to the position, I was incredibly impressed by Gita's career trajectory and the impact on the industry that she's having. To have garnered what feels like mutual respect and to be treated as a colleague by a direct supervisor has been invaluable. Without this combination of a cohort of fellows, access to other departments, and effective mentorship, my year would probably have been would not have been pleasantly ordinary. That was supposed to be smarter sounding than it did. It's okay. I'll end with what I see as some limitations for programs like these or for the work that we're trying to engage. I would like to, no, I'm not going to read that. I fear that in programs like these, if initiating them, programs like the Mellon Diversity Fellowship can unintentionally lead employers to rest on their laurels, right? That's always the danger that we're afraid of. Satisfied that an effort has been made to create one position, the need for the work of diversity can be forgotten. Diversity is not a singular project, as my colleagues have pointed out, right? But rather is a culmination of multiple efforts. Lots of different attacks must be waged. So please don't consolidate diversity into one body and one person, right? It puts a lot of pressure on that person too. Publishers should see programs such as these as one effort in a multitude of initiatives to increase the level of diversity amongst its employees. Strategies for recruitment and retention that are gleaned through these programs should be applied to positions throughout the process. And I think that Gita's already modeled that, right? Some of the things that we learned through recruiting and winning through the fellowship applications from this year. This goes hand in hand with my last point, but there's a top-down method that can cause confusion. If diversity efforts are consolidated into a single position created by managers, other employees may not see the need behind this or understand its rationale, right? So I think some of the transparency that I think Charles was talking about before. Positions like these should be understood as merely one part of a broader set of visible diversity initiatives that all employees participate in. Yeah, so I think getting everybody on the side of this as a press is really key there. Good. Lastly, I want to say that I think the language of diversity can sometimes be vague at best and misleading at its worst. The Mellon Fellowship, as I understand it, was written specifically in response to recent surveys, including the Lee and Low Diversity Baseline Survey and the Publishers Weekly Salary Survey, that continue to show the lack of diversity in terms of race, sexual orientation, and stability in the industry itself. overall, in some particular sectors of the industry, more so than others. I was surprised this year, as Gita mentioned, that half of our applicants were white, right, for this new fellow. And they either did not address the diversity component of the fellowship, or they said that they themselves were experts in diversity. I was even more surprised by how these applicants were defining diversity and the relationship to it. I think it's a given that we should all support diversity efforts and support diversity. If you're doing that, that's like a baseline for humanity, I think. However, I think we need to be clear and direct about the ways in which our efforts and initiatives are direct correctives addressed at changing these statistics in specific ways. I'm sure some of this is merely a confusion on the parts of applicants, yet I also worry that the language of diversity as a replacement for words like affirmative action or underrepresentation or even historical exclusion, right? I'm really happy to hear Helen name white supremacy when we're talking about white supremacy. I'm afraid that replacing those words with diversity might open up the possibility for confusion. So I ask that we just be clear on what our intentions are, always. Thank you.